911 operators of Reddit, what's the strangest, serious emergency you've heard? I answered the phone and gave my usual 911. Do you need police, fire, or ambulance? And the person on the other end just started screaming, bees. Bees. I assumed that the bees were neither mugging him nor on fire, so I put it through to ambulance because what the frick even? I assumed that the bees were neither mugging him nor on fire, so I put it through to ambulance because what the frick even? And now there is coffee all over my desk and my supervisor is looking at me weirdly. Take your upvote. Had a dude who called in on Thanksgiving because my wife is chasing me around the house with a knife because I called her bird dry. Also had a guy shoot somebody while on the phone with me. Also had a guy get arrested while on the phone with me. I don't miss those days. The emergency itself wasn't particularly strange, vaginal bleeding during pregnancy, nor was the call mine. But in training I listened to a call that contained the following exchange. So she's bleeding now? Yep. Where is she bleeding from? From her bottom part. Which bottom part, sir? I need you to be specific. Her rectum. Front part. Wait. What? So is she bleeding from her rectum or from the front? God dang it, she's bleeding from her pee hole. I think it's impossible to read that last line without a heavy southern accent. 911, what's your emergency? There's a pig in the road. A big one. So where are you? At the stoplight. It's the biggest dang pig I have ever seen. Get someone here now. One stoplight town. The bar is near the intersection. How big is the pig? About the size of a Volkswagen? How much have you had to drink? I'm not freaking drunk. It's a giant pig the size of a small car. What is wrong with you people? Officers show up to find a full-grown hippo that had escaped from the local wild animal park. Big, frickin' pig eater. This was at 2:30 AM when the bar's close. Lots of calls from elderly people hallucinating because of a UT. One woman had been following CPR instructions and when the crew arrived, she was doing very gentle chest compressions on her slightly confused, but very much alive, cat. We had a lady who would call all the time about people in her yard or on her house, usually doing nasty things. Always a false alarm. This lady had been calling since way before I got my job, and even now after I've switched agencies, she's probably still calling. She's mental, but not a danger to herself or others, so no real need to commit her involuntarily. Well, one day we get a call from her about a man at her house, causing the troubles for her. My supervisor, who had answered the call, finally got fed up and asked to speak to the man. To everyone's surprise, the woman handed the phone over to the man, and there was someone there. It was her brother. He was there trying to get her committed. We ended up, I believe, asking him to leave the property because he couldn't have her committed against her will at that time. Just goes to show you that crazy doesn't always mean wrong. A family member was working in an emergency room and said the following case came in about a month ago. A guy got high on PCP, suddenly thinks I'm a bit hungry and would like to have some eggs. Proceeds to cut out one of his testicles and fry it in a frying pan. His girlfriend walks in while he's doing that and goes what the heck, at which point he's like, oh, whoops, sorry, and tries to put his fried testicle back in his scrotum. Then he was in the hospital. I don't know the result, but I can guess. This made my balls shrivel up into my body and I'm a female. Jesus. I've got one for ya. The obligatory not 911, but it'll tie together. So, I worked for an alarm monitoring company. I get an inbound call in the middle of the night from somewhere in Philadelphia. Guy on the line sounds real out of it, drunk maybe? My first thought was it was someone calling in to cancel a false alarm. Messed up voice was them waking from sleep, not uncommon. Some alarms, hell, start going off in my head. The guy isn't making a whole lot of sense, and it's really hard to get basic information out of him. Eventually I pieced together that he's a gas station worker, and he's been shot. For some reason he dialed the alarm company instead of 911. We weren't even his alarm company. There was probably an old sticker in the shop somewhere, so I've got no info on this guy. Mind you, we don't have any magical reverse phone lookup system, and our systems are locked down such that we can't access a web browser. Genius. I know. Pulled out my phone. Also not allowed. Managed to look up a gas station with the inbound number in Philly, called 911 and got police and medical out there. No idea how it ultimately shook out. Stayed on the line keeping the guy conscious and talking until they got there, then disconnected. My sister is an EMT in a small rural college town. Apparently there have been more than one calls about horses collapsing and hurting their rider handler. Broken arms, legs, trapped under horse, etc. When she was new to it, someone just described it as a collapsed horse, and she thought that they were supposed to treat the horse's condition. I'm close to an area where equestrian stuff is pretty popular. When I was a medical student on trauma, I was surprised we had like 4 horse related injuries on service at the same time. Apparently it isn't that unusual here. Heard this one the other day, not from the perspective of an operator but close. M's response to a call where a man reported having multiple potatoes stuck up his rectum colon. Not red potatoes, those big brown suckers. The kicker, I was washing my potatoes in the shower when I slipped and fell and all the potatoes went up there. What? I wouldn't even try to say I fell on it. I know nobody would believe me, and I'd look like a bigger idiot. I'd just own it and the dispatchers would probably make just a little less fun of me behind my back. My mom was a dispatcher for 20 plus years. The eeriest call she ever told me about was one that started off with no voice, only breathing. She kept asking yes or no questions, working out a system to guess what was going on. Eventually he could talk a little bit and said the person who hurt him was still there, so the officers went in guns drawn. He'd said the person was there but hadn't specified that they were dead. Turns out the guy couldn't talk because his throat was sliced open, which he had done to himself, to make it look like his wife, whom he had just murdered, had attacked him first. I got dispatched for neck pain. Get there, find out a couple were having sex on a couch when the female heard a large pop in her head, followed by splitting headache and nausea. We transport and after a CT scan find that she somehow developed a tear in her arachnoid meningeal tissue. Serious crap, but humorous and odd. Row, he almost literally fricked her brains out. Not sure if that makes him a legend or a monster lol. I once dispatched a helicopter for a woman gored by a reindeer. Apparently there is a reindeer farm for tourists and she tried to kiss it. My pilot and flight crew laughed at them and asked 3 times to repeat. I responded to a man in his whitey tighties standing on the yellow lines in the middle of the road. Arrived on scene to find this to be true. The reason he was in the middle of the road was to practice his karate moves on cars. Dispatch was even having a hard time keeping from laughing. The very first emergency call I took by myself during training. Trainer was hooked into my phone and could jump in whenever. I answered a 911 while my trainer was trying to grab a cup of coffee from the machine. Long cords, and as soon as the phone connected there was what sounded like an explosion and people screaming all over the place. Scared the Jesus out of my trainer who sprinted back to the desk thinking I had just picked up some huge disaster or accident. Takes over the call, starts asking questions, and it turns out what we heard was just rushing water from a hot water heater that ruptured and was spewing water all over these 2 girls' apartment and they were freaking out not knowing what to do about it. Bonus story. Had a similar call a few years later, picked up to a bunch of people being loud, sounding panicked, talking about someone being locked in a car. Thought it was a child locked in a car. A very high priority call for my agency, due to being in Florida and a few recent deaths. So I put the call in as urgent, while trying to get anyone on the phone to actually talk to me. But then I hear a door open, and someone in the background scream, "It's out. The chicken is free, phone disconnects. Florida. Florida. Say no more." The first call I took was from a blind elderly male. He called because he had found his son on the floor of a bedroom. He was not responding, so I had him tilt his head back and listen for a breath. Nothing. He said he was warm and he had talked with him less than 20 minutes prior, so I guided him through CPR. Compressions only because of the circumstances. He lived in a rural part of our county and we were low on rigs, so we did this for about 12 minutes before help arrived on scene. Ems goes inside and immediately asks for PD. This isn't unusual. Sometimes loved ones can't or don't want to believe that it's too late, so we go through the motions until a train dies there. PD gets there and asks for a detective. This is also not unusual for younger deaths. 2 hours later and still there, it piques my curiosity. I called the first officer that arrived and found out that the poor man had been doing CPR on his now mostly headless son. He had been taking a nap and his son committed suicide with a shotgun. It woke him up but not quick enough for it to register as a gunshot. When I had asked him to tilt his head back, he did so by using his chin, which was still there. I think it worked out for the best because he had support there when he learned the truth, and it didn't make my job any tougher, but it definitely made for an unusual start to my dispatch career. Obligatory not 911 operator. I'm the son of the caller. My dad called 911 late one night to report hitting a 6-foot tall chicken while driving and running off into the ditch. He had just crashed his car and his voice was a bit shaky on the phone, so the operator asked him to repeat himself a couple of times and then promised to send someone to help. The first cop on scene got out of his car with a breathalyzer in hand. By the time he got to the back of my dad's car, he was laughing hysterically over his radio, telling people that it wasn't a DUI call. My dad actually did hit a 6-foot tall chicken. And that's the story about the night my dad and all the local cops learned about emu farming. I think I'd be panicking just as much. It's one thing to hit a normal animal, another to run over a dang emu. Not me, but my dad works in an emergency room, and one time he had to treat someone who had been attacked by an owl. The owl was unconscious on the side of the road, and she thought it was dead. Because she didn't want the children on the school bus to see the dead owl, she decided the best course of action would be to put the owl in the back of her car. Unfortunately, the owl wasn't dead. It woke up and attacked her. Like the deer in Tommy Boy. Okay, so my friend is a former 911 operator and she told me that she got this call from what sounded like an old man. B was telling her that it's been a while and that she should come back over. Like, hey, it's been so long. I miss you. Do you still remember the address 123 Street? Remember, she assumed that he was just senile or something. Turns out he had someone in his house and he didn't want them to know he was calling 911. We got a call from a woman having severe abdominal pains. Simple enough. We asked the normal questions. Are you feeling faint? Are you vomiting blood? Stuff like that. Then we asked if it was traumatic or not. Well, she eventually tells us that she had a tampon stuck inside of her for more than 20 days, and she thinks that might be why she's hurting. Thanks for telling me that second story. I'm gonna go throw up now. Not me, but my cousin. She had this lady who would call regularly and often make up stories, most likely due to loneliness, but they still had to send someone out every time. So one day when they got a call from her, they figured it would be another one of those calls. Cousin, 911, what's your emergency? Her, there's a lion in my living room. Cousin, there's a lion in your living room? What's it doing? Her, pauses to ask it what it was doing. I don't know, just standing there. Can you send someone over? Turned out there actually was a lion cub in her living room that had escaped from a circus or something nearby. She's the real life boy who cried wolf story, except she still had a response in the end. Obligatory not a 911 operator, but my soon-to-be mother-in-law. She got a call that a guy and his roommate were doing drugs, and the caller's friend overdosed. So this absolute mensa hooks up a couple wires to the inside of a toaster, turns the toaster on, and attaches the wires to his unconscious friend's testicles. Honestly, not sure if it successfully electrocuted the unconscious guy, but the caller definitely seemed to think it would wake his friend up. My mother-in-law's response? So please don't do that again. At first I was thinking somehow he was going to miraculously use it as some sort of defibrillator to revive him, but the story turned quickly. I still give it a 10/10. Woman screaming that her drug addict partner had been bitten by her Weimaraner dog. She was going on about how he loved the dog and the dog was lovely normally, but her partner's finger was bleeding. When the crew got there, they reported back to the control room that the man's arm had been degloved from the elbow down. Yikes. Got a call from some girl saying, someone stole my car. I ask if she saw what direction they went. She says they're heading down the street and starts telling me the stores they're passing. I ask if she's following them. She says that she is in the car. I freak the frick out. She then says to whoever is driving, babe, slow down, this is crazy. Turns out she and her boyfriend were arguing. He started driving crazy since he was mad and she decided to call it in as a stolen vehicle. Another story. We get a call that there's 2 loose dogs running around a major street. About 30 seconds later an officer comes over the radio to tell me that they just hit 2 dogs on the street. Same dogs. That's just a couple of minor stories I could think of. I'll post more as I think of them. 911 operators should have a million crazy stories. I only did it for 4 months. Was a 911 op for 5 years. Had a female call, screaming he's stabbing me. He's stabbing me. She's get away from her husband who's going at her over and over with an ice pick. It becomes evident to me that she's moving around the house in an attempt to get away. I'm telling her, can you barricade yourself? Can you get away from him? Can you get out of the house? She told me that she's trying and that interjects that her husband is blind. Now, I'm really confused. She's not giving me much information. Typical with panicky victims in the heat of a crime, and I'm trying to figure out how she can't get away from a blind person. She gets quiet, and I can hear him saying all kinds of nasty things about her. Cops get there, secure the scene, and they fly her to a trauma center. She lived. Still, we were all standing around after, so confused that this woman couldn't escape a blind man from stabbing her. Have lived with a blind person. They can't move with a confidence that would surprise the heck out of you when they need to, in a highly familiar environment, anyhow. 1. Ultra calm caller. Girlfriend is having a fit. Me. Does she have any weapons? Him. Just the eggs she's throwing at me. Me. What is she wearing? Him. Underwear. 2. Took a call for a hostage situation in a cab once. The driver was talking to me but trying not to make it obvious. Passenger implied a weapon and wanted him to drive to the middle of nowhere so that he could kill him and the lady in the front seat. The driver ended up crashing into another car to cause a distraction. 3. Screaming lady caller. He's throwing the car thing at me. It was a hubcap. 4. He flushed my weed so I poured his beer out and we bowed to throw down. 5. Guy found his pet cat's head sitting upright on the table on his front porch. No body. Called back later. Someone had placed the body in his car. 1. Reminds me of a call I dispatched for where the subject was hitting people with a sub from Subway. One of my proudest moments was updating the units en route that their subject was armed with a sandwich. In the most serious tone possible, of course. It was my call to 911 but something tells me they've relayed this story from their perspective a few times. I got hit from behind by one of my 220-pound Suffolk ram sheep. Never saw it coming. Knocked the snot out of me. Barely escaped as he was trying to finish me off. Once outside the fence, I went into shock as all the adrenaline drained. Had to call 911. Overheard the EMT in the ambulance trying to clarify to the ER that the patient they were transporting was not a victim of pedestrian versus truck. The hospital thought I'd been hit by a Dodge Ram pickup. My friend in the ER told me how someone passed out on an escalator and his hand was running into the grate where the top of the escalator meets the floor for half an hour before someone found him. His hand was pretty messed up from what I heard. Thank you for giving me a reason not to sleep for weeks. That's one dream I don't need. 1. Jogger found drunk male passed out in the bushes with his pants around his ankles. He was apparently robbed of his wallet but the thief was considerate enough to leave a single debit card wedged between and sticking out of victim's buttocks. We called the poor bastard Swipe ATM for weeks. 2. Couple having sex in hotel room. Female falls off the bed and lands on a champagne flute, breaking it at the stem, puncturing through the side of her groin and hitting a femoral artery. She bled out and died. I was a 0 operator, not 911, but many small towns didn't have 911 so I got quite a few emergency calls. I got a call from a 13-year-old girl once that had just gotten home from school. She couldn't find her father, but there was an ominous note there that she had read to me. I had police on the way and told her to wait outside for them. Rather, I heard her walking around her house, going from room to room, opening doors looking for him. After about a minute, she let out a blood-curdling scream yelling, "He's here! He's here! He's here!" He was hanging dead in the garage. Was a terrible call. I got a 15-minute break and had to get back on the board taking calls again. It's been almost 20 years and I can still hear her voice. Strangest call? Kid who felt experimenty and lost an adult toy up his ass. Wasn't anything I could do but transport to the ear and try not to laugh. Most serious call, milk truck T-boned an Amish buggy going about 60 miles per hour. The buggy was in the wrong. It annihilated the buggy and I don't remember for sure but I'm pretty sure the occupants inside did not survive. I remember they got flown to the ear with massive trauma but it was like 2007 to 2009ish, been an EMT for over 12 years now going on 13. I feel old lol. Pretty sure I'm going to move back to volunteering soon. I sometimes drive in Amish country and they always scare the heck out of me. A friend of the family was, potentially still is, a paramedic with the helicopter service here. I'm not sure if this was when he was a ground-based or in the helicopter but he enjoyed this story. He was called out to a head trauma incident and arrived to find a man sitting in his living room, acting very normal for a call like that. So he asked what was wrong and the man said, well, I've got this here, and turned to show a screwdriver buried to the hilt in his head. So the paramedic obviously said something along the lines of how that isn't good and the man said nah, it's alright, and began turning the screwdriver. They told him to stop. I had a professor who exploded a cat with a shotgun in an attempt to get it out of a tree and another who made his partner pass out by having a girl show him her eyeball that had popped out after a car accident. That first story made me cringe. Like, ow. You have been visited by the lemon shibby like in 3 seconds or you will never have vitamin C again. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.